All right, welcome to episode 3 of Hodges Heroes as we are trying to make the most of our mess. Episode 1, we talked about what do you do when things are not what you think they should be. Episode 2, we spent a little bit of time talking about teachers and doctors. What does that look like? How do you work with some of those systems? But today we want to get a little bit more personal. And what I mean by that is, you know, we want to talk to you a little bit more about some of the day-to-day activities and day-to-day things that happen when you're just living this life. So, Janan, take it away.
So, one thing that we have learned over the course of our time being a special needs family is the importance of respite care. And quite honestly, this is a struggle that we have right now that we're trying to find more respite care, particularly for Doug, myself, and our younger son. But I want to go back a little bit. When Tyler was first diagnosed with ADHD, he has diagnoses currently of ADHD, autism. He has some academic deficits, among anything else that he has going on. But when he was in kindergarten, he still was receiving special education services. We had that conference. Hey, he's struggling with focus. So we tried different things for ADHD, diet wise, didn't really work. We started him on meds. But quite honestly, I was struggling at that point. My child was failing. I'm a teacher, for heaven's sakes. My mom's a teacher. My mother-in-law is a teacher. But this was hard, right? Because I help other people's kids. How come my kid is struggling? And at that point, Doug, if I don't know if you remember this or not, I wanted to talk to you about this. And quite honestly, you were not at the point where
Yeah,
you
I
could
don't
talk about it.
process things the same way Janan does.
True that.
My way of processing is getting as far away from people as I possibly can in absolute total solitude, and I'll work it out most of the time. Whereas Janan wants to just constantly talk about it. And
It's
that
true.
does not, that makes it worse for me. It helps her, but it makes it worse for me. And in that season, I basically kind of said to her, I love you, I care about you, I want you to get help with this. I just can't help you with it right now. We got to find somebody that can.
So again, at that point, we had a newly 6-year-old and we had a 3-year-old. And Doug, based on what he was doing at the time, he found this resource, CHAD. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember the entire acronym. We talked a little bit about acronyms last time. I think it was children and adults with attention deficit disorder. And we were living in North Florida at the time in a rural area, but Nemours Children's Hospital had a support group or
It's a
house.
national program and they have
Right,
chapters at various places. Sometimes
right.
in hospitals, sometimes it's, in clinics, sometimes, so it's at universities. I mean, there's any number of places that can, you know, host one of the, CHAD and CARD, which Center for Autism Related Disorders, is
Correct.
another national program that does similar things.
So at that point, our child was not diagnosed with autism yet. He still had the IEP that said he was DD, developmentally delayed, LI, language impaired, and now he has an ADHD diagnosis, and now we're going down medicine. Doug didn't want to talk about it. I needed to process with someone. And quite honestly, at that stage, there was no one else going through what I was going through in our circle of friends or different things like that.
Yeah, we were in a small community. So, it had like 20,000 people in a, 20-mile radius kind of thing. So there wasn't a lot of people that we could reach out to.
And not to say there weren't people going through it, but at this stage with what we were dealing with, at that point, I didn't know of anybody. So Doug found this resource for Chad, and it was in Jacksonville, and again took place at Nemours. It was once a month at night, and quite honestly, it was challenging for me to get there because I had to figure out childcare with your schedule and some different things going on. But we made it a priority. And I'll be honest with you, we've actually, I think we first started meeting at the Ronald McDonald House. That's actually where it started. And then we moved into Nemours Children's Hospital. And we had an amazing facilitator, Marty Clark, who I am still Facebook friends with. And she's a professional, in the realm with, helping families, but she had one of her own children who was, they were grown at this point, but she had dealt with it personally. And she was trying to help other people going through the process. And I will tell you, the first few months, I just sat there quietly listening to other people's stories. And not everybody's story was exactly like ours, but there were so many similarities of parents who were struggling, and their child had a meltdown in the middle of the Lego store and just sat there, started crying, and different things like that, where I would just sit there quietly and just cry. And because I wasn't at the point to, because we were so new in this diagnosis and journey, and what this meant and how challenging it was at that time. The cool thing about that support group is I can honestly say, and I told someone this the other day, that the number one thing that helped me when we started this journey with the ADHD diagnosis was going to that support group. This was not a religious based support group. I didn't even know these people. These were complete strangers to me. Some had kids who were 13, some had kids who were 6 like mine, some had kids who were 25, some were adults going to attend this. And over the course of the 3 years that I attended it, I ended up learning so much, finding resources from these other people, realizing those people got through that with their child and they're on to the next thing. And many of their children were thriving at that point, to the point at the end of it, our facilitator had to, miss a couple, and she had actually asked me to facilitate. The irony of that was when I came, I was so broken and I was so saddened by this and just needed that support. So at that stage in our life, it wasn't friends, it wasn't family, it wasn't our church community. Although all of those things and people were great, it was that support group with a group full of strangers that helped me.
Yeah, and I didn't go with her. She
Nope,
went by herself,
sure did.
and and somebody had to stay home with the kids. But and I'm not dissing support groups in any way, shape, or
Right.
form. I lead support groups, so that I mean, professionally, I've done that, and they're tremendously valuable. But it wasn't where I was at that stage
Correct.
in the things. That wasn't where I needed to get help from. But when we talk about respite care, support groups are a part of that.
Mhm.
We talked about church family, we talked about family, we talked about friends. Those are all a part of that. But sometimes family and friends can create more of a burden than they can a release. Especially when your family doesn't understand. Oh, you just gotta spank that kid more, or you gotta tell him what you leave with me for 5 minutes. I'll fix them. Like, well, here you go, have at it. That if they don't understand, and it's not that somebody has to be exactly where you're at. Somebody has to know exactly what you're going through and because nobody's ever going to be exactly where you're at and have the exact same things. But when somebody can see things and go, oh yeah, there's something going on there. As we're even at this stage, we're walking around, we see something happening, and the dad is going out with a kid, and the kid's doing their thing. You can tell it's not just a brat of a kid. There's something else going on.
Correct.
Like I can walk up and fist bump the parents, say, "Hey man, stay in it.
Yeah.
You got this." And those types of things, when somebody can come along and not judge you and not tell you what a bad parent you are, but come along and just say, hey, the struggle's real. I hear you. That creates just a little bit of an aid, a little bit of a lift to
Sure.
kind of help you work through some things. So finding that community, finding those things, man, it's not always easy. It's not
No,
always intuitive.
no.
One of the things that we found currently that has been really helpful for us is Special Olympics. Did you want to talk about now? Or are we
We're
saving
going to
that?
save that for the next episode. But yes, the Special Olympics community has been invaluable. And
And it's
to
not so much about the Special Olympics
the
for us and what we're
sports,
talking about
yes,
on this. It's about the community of parents that we have a chance to connect with and interact with. It might be in a school-based program if you have a special, if you're in a special needs program, some of the parents in those systems are,
yeah,
they can be invaluable of helping you be able to work through some of those things. But it might be professional help. Now, I will tell you, our pediatrician, they sent us to a therapist early on because we said, look, we need help. And so we signed up to go, and the therapist said, you have to bring your son here. And we're like, trust me, he's not the one that needs help. We need help. We know he's got his issues, but no, he has to come. We have to code it, which they don't, I know now, I didn't know then, but anyhow, we bring him.
I totally
You,
forgot
you
about
don't remember
this.
this?
Oh my goodness, that seems like
Yeah,
so
you blocked
back.
that probably.
I
So
probably
we walk
did.
into this therapist office, and
With our what? He was probably
he's
6 to 8,
he
7.
wasn't even that old, I don't think. He was like 5 or 6.
I don't
Like
know.
it's
I don't know.
kindergarten because we were like, we just need help. We need some
Yeah, we
resources.
do.
And so he's sitting in the corner, and as a therapist, I'm giving her I'm writing her notes for her. I'm giving her the rundown, the history and physical, everything. I'm going. And while the whole time he's over on her little play shelf, ripping every single toy off of the
Right.
shelf, doing all of
And
her
I'm
stuff,
like,
open
put
things,
that
doing
back. Don't
that.
do this. Blah blah. Trying to
And
listen to her.
and the lady's like trying to like redirect Tyler in this nice sweet, oh please, let's save that for later, Tyler, which is he doesn't respond to. Uh, and I distinctly remember at one point the therapist say, hey, can we just take a minute? I'm just feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now. And I'm like, you've had 30 minutes of this. We've got a 50-minute session and we got to get something out of this. And
For
and I'm
real.
trying to get, and you're overwhelmed at 30 minutes. Like, what are you going to do for us? And I remember as a therapist walking out of that office going, yeah, we're never coming back here. And it was insightful for me. It was from a professional standpoint, it was a growth element for me to recognize that if somebody doesn't get something in the first session, they're bouncing. They're not coming back for the most part because it took them, they had to take off from work, they had to get things scheduled, they
Right.
had to do, they're paying money.
And this
And
was before COVID and
yeah,
everything
you
went
couldn't do
online.
telehealth.
This
You,
was
you had to
not
you had to
that
show
was not
up,
the norm way back when.
and there was a waiting list to get to places and all
Mhm.
this kind of stuff. So the reality is not all therapists are created equal.
That's the truth.
Not all therapists have the same insight and knowledge around certain things,
Mhm.
and it's okay to fire your therapist. If you need to go find somebody else, go find somebody else. You can ask questions ahead of time. Most places now, all that's on a website that kind of shows you what some of their credentialing is. But therapy isn't for everybody. And I say that as a therapist.
Hmm.
Not everybody's going to get something out of therapy. And not everybody's going to get something out of a support group.
Mhm.
But everybody needs to get something from somewhere.
That's right.
And this is a difficult journey to go on. And you got to find some measure of a rhythm in which you can be able to take breaks.
One thing that we've done, granted our kids are older now, but on Wednesday night they go to youth group at church. And over the last few years, we have made that date night because they don't have any other adult things going on right at that time at church. So we're like, we're going to date night. So that's one thing that we have made a priority, particularly during the school year. Summer's a little wonky because kids have different activities, but we typically find a place. Sometimes you pick, sometimes I pick. We tend to usually eat barbecue because we love barbecue, but that gives us a time as a couple to reconnect. And a lot of the times we are talking about some logistics and some issues with kids or even some positives with kids, but it gives us time away because if we have found traditionally in our marriage that if we don't make the time for each other, then we're going back and forth at each other. And that's not healthy for us. It's not healthy for our children.
Yeah, especially our oldest is going to feed off of conflict.
Oh,
And what I
yes.
mean by that
Yes.
is if there's conflict between he and I, he doesn't try to like soothe it. It's his way to respond to it is he sucks it in and then just spews it back out you times 10 whatever he just
Right.
received. And so us being able to be on the same page, if we do need to have a disagreement about something or process through something, being able to do that away from them
Yes.
is a healthy environment. And if you do that in a public place like a restaurant, you're gonna kind of temper yourself already to not get super loud and yell and throw things most of the time.
I have
Uh,
never thrown anything, so don't even bring that on.
but that you do that at a restaurant, you're under control.
Yeah.
You're in a public environment. You're not going to get too loud. You're not going to go through things.
Just a second. So, date nights, I know some other people get their nails or toes done. I know sometimes for you, you like to reset just going in the woods to journal or walk or hike or take the dog to a trail or bike ride. Other people like to work out. But whatever it is, you've got to figure out a time to reset. And that can be very tricky if you are
But that's also for a couple, but that's also for an individual. And what
100%.
she just said, like her going to a trail is torture. That's just
It's
not
not
gonna,
torture.
and eh, you know, it's different for different people. You need
That's
some
true.
time for yourself to be able to reset in a healthy way,
Yeah.
and you need some time as a couple to reset in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I fought for a long time is taking separate vacations.
Hmm.
And for the longest time, I didn't want to treat Tyler differently. I wanted to be able to include him in as much
Yeah.
as we can, and we did. We've gone on some trips, we've done some things, and it's been it was a, the last couple were a real
It
challenge.
was hard.
And we began to realize, more so me than Janan, she was ready to do this sooner than I was. But for
That's
me,
true.
it was a realization that it's just not kind to be asking him to do some of these things that the rest of us can do. Just like travel in an airplane is incredibly complex and it's not something you do every day. So there's no routines to have with it. And there's a ton of variables that if the seat back entertainment in front of you is broken on his seat, which
Oh,
happened to one
bless
of
it.
us,
Yes.
then,
Oh,
or a
that was
kid
bad.
next to you is screaming or
Or it
whatever.
smells differently in there, or the
Yeah,
stale air, or the air is loud, and then there are
it's hot,
announcements.
it's
There's
cold,
a
it's this,
or
that.
we're running late, the flights change, or we've got to hurry. Any
Yeah,
of that, the
those things you just
transitions.
can't do
Yeah,
all that
it's
terribly well,
we've learned over
and
time, and
so it's not restful for him. It's not kind for him. It's not,
it's not
and
for us.
it's a nightmare for the rest
Yeah,
of us.
because then we're going back and forth, and we're trying to appease things, and then we've got another child, and then sometimes a grandparent's involved, and like it's like why did we choose? What's that saying? I sent you that meme the other day about how vacation is just taking your kids to another place, or arguing in another place, or having conflict, whatever
Or
that
eating
is.
chicken nuggets in another place or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, and
You know,
we've said that we need like a vacation from our vacations because
and
it's
so in
been
times when
rough.
we can find somebody to take care of our kids and look after things,
Yeah,
we try to take as much advantage of that as we can. That gets harder. The older they
yeah.
get and the more needs that they have, there are fewer, less and less people that are competent and qualified to be able to do some of those things.
And honestly, the expense of it, truthfully. And that's one, and in all full disclosure, that's one thing that we're working on. We're trying to find someone, people, different situations to potentially stay with him if we want to go somewhere. And we do have great family, and we do have people that can support, but we also have aging parents, and we also know that when he is not in a good space, it is very, very
And taking
challenging.
him to go stay with somebody, man, that's just not healthy for him most of the
Right,
time
right,
because he needs to be in his home environment, his home routines, that kind of thing.
right. So that's an area
But
that
we've
we're
learned to
working on.
take separate vacations. So, sometimes Janana go off with our younger son, sometimes I'll go off, and we have things where we try to work that out to have some measure of balance. And
Yeah.
sometimes we try to just take him, one of
Right,
us go and
right.
take him somewhere where just he wants to go and things he
Well,
wants to do.
and sometimes that has morphed over the last couple of years based on his tolerance and different sensory and different issues. But that could mean, hey, I take him down to my family's house on a weekend, just he and
Or
I,
my family, you've
or
taken him
yours.
too.
Sorry, the dog's playing with something under the table if you hear something. Or taking him elsewhere because he desires to do fun things. He doesn't want to have meltdowns, but it can be very challenging, and especially not just on us as his parents, but also on his younger brother and also on grandparents. And so there's a lot of factors. I mean, it's
And
not ideal.
and he wants what he wants. So,
Yeah.
for example, I drove, 3 hours one way to Clearwater Beach to take him one day. We get to the beach and he looks around and realizes Tom Cruise isn't there because he thinks that he can go see Tom Cruise at Clearwater because
Because he
apparently he
lives
has a
there.
house there. Uh, and when Tom Cruise wasn't at the beach and he began to realize that, well, okay, he's ready to go home. And like, I just set up the chair, I hadn't even like taken my
Accurate.
sandals off and he's ready to go home. So if you got everybody there doing that and everybody else wants
Yeah.
to go and he's ready to go and it's, you're in an unfamiliar environment,
Yeah.
then that becomes challenging. So
Well, and I
in
think
that
it
trip, we just, all right, let's go, time to leave.
I think too, it's also there is a level of, and I hate to say the word disappointment, but like, sometimes, people, us included, we look forward to these great vacations and these bucket lists and whatever, but then sometimes we're in the midst of it. I'm like, I would much rather stay home in my controlled environment and not have the meltdown and the tumultuous situation. So again, that's something that we're working on because Doug and I desperately want to spend time together. Like we've got some bucket lists we want to go to together, but this is not the time for that until we can figure out some support for him.
But the point of all what we're saying today as we wrap this up is it's worth the work to take the time
Yeah.
to invest into rest for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm a better parent when I'm rested. I'm a better husband when I'm rested. I'm a better
Amen.
person when I'm rested. If I take the time to be able, and I just, full disclosure, it's hard for me to do that sometimes
Yeah.
because I feel a tremendous amount of guilt when I take things on my own
Yeah.
and I go off by myself.
Well, and honestly, when there have been times, and we've talked about this recently, how, we're like, go take the time. And then it all goes downhill when I'm home and something goes awry. And then I'm crying or one's calling. And I do recognize that. And that's something that I know I'm trying to work on, but we're trying to figure out how do we navigate that to give that one parent
Yeah, because
respite.
I need respite for a reason, and it's because things have built up with in other
Yeah.
areas, and sometimes stepping away from that even just for an hour or two, and to come back, and it's like, oh, now there's this major issue that's transpired,
Right.
and it's just makes it all the worse.
So
That
you've
that can
got
be a challenge.
Right. It can be. So you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to take care of your relationships. It's just like anything. If you want your marriage to succeed or you want the relationship with your child to succeed, you've got to invest the time for it. You've got to make the time. And honestly, you got to schedule it. So whatever your
And
respite,
sometimes you got to spend the money to do it. And I'm
yeah,
not talking about spending money on like getting a fancy hotel. It might be spending money on a caregiver or a babysitter.
correct.
Having those people in your life that can provide those types of respite and resource. If you got family around that helps you with that, awesome. Take
That is
advantage
great.
of it.
Yeah,
But if you don't invest into it, find it, go to some of the websites, talk to people that can help you provide some of those things. Maybe you have conversations with VPK or school or wherever you're at, who might be
yeah,
available as a resource. Those are all things that you check that out where you can in order to be able to make sure that you do get the time to take the breaks that you need.
absolutely. All right. So I think that concludes this episode. Our next episode will be about Special Olympics.
Bye bye.